And Jack Cruzy is the webmaster, done an outstanding job with our website, and it is the official website for wrestling for officiating in Ohio. And of course, our rules interpreters. Dick is a rules interpreter, as is Jim is the DOD. Where's Jim? He's back there, Director of Development. And Ray Anthony, where's Ray? Ray's back there as one of the rules interpreters. And of course, Vince and Lyle are still members. The next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to, for the people, especially our guests, to realize who's in this room. So I want to start, and I'll start over here with Bill. And if you stand up, these are members of the various board, halls of fame. We have our Hall of Fame, the Coaches Hall of Fame, and the OHSAA Hall of Fame, Officials Hall of Fame, that we have members that belong to. So, Bill, just introduce yourself.
Bill Orr, Southwest Ohio, Cincinnati.
Okay, Tony.
Tony Campo, Central District.
Tony was also inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame a year ago. Who else we got? Going around the room. Come on, guys.
Who's in the Hall of Fame?
Who's in the Hall of Fame? Stand up, Tom.
Tom Brady, Central District.
David Taylor, Central District.
Larry Saxton, Northwest.
Who else here?
Greg West, Central District.
Ray.
Ray Anthony, Northeast.
Am I missing anybody? Ron Chance?
Ron Chance, Eastern District.
Kish?
Why is it tougher when I get there? Steve Kish, Eastern District.
Steve is also a member of the OHSAA Hall of Fame. Jimmy?
Jim Freeland, Northwest. Couple of them.
And he also is a member of the OHSAA Hall of Fame. I'm sorry, geez.
A big deal.
Anybody I'm missing?
Sean
Dan.
Crozier.
Sean Crozier, proud member of the Eastern District.
Doesn't count from the Eastern District. Okay, what I'd like to do is introduce our first inductee, and I don't remember. Was somebody going to introduce you, or is I'm going to do it? I guess. Tom Bauer is from as far north as you can get in Ohio without swimming. He's from Lorain County. And how many guys remember Frank Fiore? Frank was one of Tom's mentors, and Frank told him, he said, when he started officiating, you've got to become an ambassador for Lorain County Wrestling. And Tom's done that. He brought the postseason tournaments to Lorain. Obviously, they're on the edge of Cleveland, and they weren't getting a lot of recognition up through the 60s and 70s. And Tom worked real hard to make sure that their wrestlers and their coaches were recognized. He also helped start the association, the Lorain County Wrestling Coaches and Officials Association. He is a member of their Hall of Fame, and they have a scholarship fund too that he helps with a lot. And last year he was named the Cleveland area official of the year. So Tom.
I'm going to have to thank Dan because he just said everything I was going to say. So that's it. But a lot of people ask me, how did you get started in this racket? Well, I got hired in Lorain High School to coach football and teach math. Well, after the football season was over, the coach I worked with was also the wrestling coach. He said, why don't you come down and roll around with the heavyweights? I didn't quite understand what roll around with the heavyweights meant. And he didn't tell me our varsity heavyweight that year was second in the state, and the JV heavyweight was a two-time All-American left tackle down here for Woody Hayes, first round draft choice for the NFL. So roll around with the heavyweights usually meant like let them work their best pinning combinations on me. But I stuck it out and started coaching in Lorain, and probably lasted about 5 years, I think, till the AD one day came into the wrestling room all in a huff and said the official never showed up down to the junior high. He said, one of you two assistants got to go down and officiate. So we flipped a coin, I lost, I had to go down and officiate. Well, that was 37 years ago, and I've been doing it ever since because I like officiating a lot more than coaching. And I would have done it again this year, it had not been for a bum knee. But like I said, when you're coming up through the ranks, you have to thank a lot of people. And I'd like to thank 3 officials that helped me along the way. And the first one was Frank Fiore, because like he said, you got to promote Lorain County. He said Lorain County isn't Cleveland, where they get the recognition, so you got to bring some recognition to Lorain County. So we started the association, and it's been very successful, very successful. And then all of a sudden we had a chance to bring the postseason into Southview. So I asked the AD and the principal if we could maybe have the tournament start having sectionals at Southview. Well, the AD said, I am a basketball man. I can't give you any help at all. And I said, that's fine, I can do all that myself. But the principal said, and I don't want any problems. Of course, we had St. Ed's, Southview was world beaters back in those days. North Olmsted team coached by one of the Milkoviches. Leary was top notch. I said, man, we got some teams here. How am I going to keep from having any problems? So I thought, who solves all the problems in wrestling and whose name means we'll get the job done? So I asked Vince Matucci if he would come and sit by my side at the Southview sectional. And 32 years later, Vince has never missed a Southview Lorain sectional. So I'd like to thank him for, allowing me to get that started there. And the last person I'd like to thank is Ray Anthony. So I think Ray promotes our area wrestling and is an advocate for all young officials starting up. I think he does an excellent job at that, and I'd like to thank him for it. Thank you, guys.
You have to make it a little bit shorter tonight on the stage. The next up is, I'm going to call him Steve Kish. God, I hate doing that. But what are they saying, Steve?
I'm afraid to ask.
Steve Kish is a member of our Hall of Fame as well as the OHSAA Hall of Fame, and he's here to present our next inductee. Steve.
Thank you, Coach. The last time, of course, Sean Crozier. I really appreciate that. The last time when I introduced Sean, there was a mistake at that time, too, that he went into the Hall of Fame. But I remember saying this, that I was asked a couple of questions. I had a heck of a time getting to my table because I was asked these 2 questions. I was asked those same questions tonight, and I hate to share it, but I'm going to. I was asked 2 questions. Did you pay for that sports coat? Yes, I did. Is that squirrel or possum? It's possum. So, along with that, I'd like to say, it went over better the last time, but why would I bring attention to myself anyhow? But I would like to say that it is my extreme pleasure to be introducing Jimmy Crozier. His brother Sean went into the Hall of Fame, I believe, 6 years ago. And at one time, I was an honorary Crozier. We used to come up here on Wednesday nights to the state tournament, and we'd drink a few Coca-Colas. There might have been some alcohol involved, I do remember some of that. Long story short, one night I was feeling no pain by 7 o'clock, and I thought, daggone it, if I go out tonight, as usual, I'm not going to be very good officiating the next day, but it would even be worse. So I did something that caused me to no longer be an honorary Crozier. I hid under a bed. Now you can imagine with the Crozier brothers, that wasn't considered very humorous. And I remember saying to Sean, hey, I apologize, I just didn't want to get sick. And I said, can I still ride up with you? And he said, no, and you have to actually stay at least a mile behind us if you follow us. So that hurt my feelings, but it's really good to see Sean get up and walk away. Jimmy Crozier was not only an outstanding official, but he was an outstanding coach. He Wrestled and played football for Steubenville Big Red High School and went on to play football at Ohio University. He was hired as head wrestling coach at Union Local High School in Morristown, Ohio, where he served as head coach for 9 years, leading his team to conference championships. He went on to serve as the athletic director and assistant principal at Union Local High School. He's been a registered official for 32 years, officiating numerous sectional, district, regional tournaments. He also refereed a number of the prestigious OVAC tournaments in Wheeling, West Virginia, and refereed an Ohio State tournament. Additionally, he officiated at the collegiate level, working the NAI National Tournament in Wheeling, West Virginia. Jim Crozier's contributions to Ohio Valley Wrestling and Ohio Wrestling, as mentioned above, have included success in both coaching and officiating. And he's always, knowing his brother would say the same thing, he's always approached wrestling, coaching, and officiating in an organized, compassionate, and professional manner. And it's really with extreme pleasure that I get to introduce the nicest of the Croziers, Jim Crozier.
Well, I guess all my thunder got killed. I've been told by probably a half a dozen people up here, keep it short. Keep it short. Well, they've actually taken some of my thunder because the story of Steve hiding under the bed was right at the top of the list. And he's always wanted to be a Crozier wannabe, and he's always been just a step below what he's able to fulfill the obligation. Anyway, you know, listen to some of the stories that are going on here. You know, it starts to remind me, and I start looking around all the people here, and probably 90% of you I can tell a story about. And if your wives are around, there's probably 100% of those 90% that want to have their wives leave the room at this point. So we won't go into any detail on that. I will tell you one story about my buddy Dan, and we've told this story time and time again. It varies just a little bit. Every time we got out of the valley, or if any time the Central Division came into the valley to officiate, somehow I always got stuck with Dan Kutcher. I always thought they just tried to put the two ugliest guys on the same mat, you know, and it ended up being that I was the only one that could carry the heaviest load. Because he just, there was always a little step behind, and as long as I could keep that 180 degree across from him, I always had his back covered. And I will say he covered my back on a few occasions too. Anyway, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Board of Governors of the Ohio Wrestling Officials Association for my consideration into the Hall of Fame. I'm deeply humbled with it. I never thought that I reached the expectations of my little brother. Steve, like I said, and there's not anything too much I can say about him. I appreciate him nominating me. Anytime we've ever had anything to say about Steve, it's always been on the abusive side, and people that don't know us would think that, you know, that's cruel. I don't think Steve likes it any other way other than being cruel to him. And then in closing, I'd like to thank all the fellows from all fellow officials from the Ohio Valley Athletic Association and the officials from across the state of Ohio that I've had the opportunity to work with. You guys know what it's like. You know, we all have our stories. Probably the best part of officiating is camaraderie. Once we get done, we can stop and drink a beer and abuse each other for the lousy calls we made and have our backs covered when the parents are coming after us. But anyway, I do appreciate, especially my brothers, because if anybody was any more critical of each other, we all abused each other as far as, you know, and I think we made each other better officials by being so critical of it. But Rick and Sean have both, you know, they're brothers. What else can you say? I really appreciate everything that they've done for me. Thank you.
Thing that I wanted to say that, I don't know if you guys understand this, but the level of officiating in Ohio is so much higher than what it is anywhere else. And what we've found is that guys will leave Ohio and go other places, and we've officiated the state, part of our guys officiated state tournaments in North Carolina, in Tennessee, in Florida, and Indiana. I know that Jack Regis is overdoing the West by God Virginia tournament this weekend. and even California has reached out to tap one of our guys. So at this time, I'd like to call on Greg West. Will you do the next presentation? Here it comes.
Thank you, Dan. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about Steve James, let you know who he is. And Steve's witty, athletic, personable. And Steve, what's this other word you wrote down here? I can't make it out. Anyway, we go back a ways. I remember when Steve wrestled for Columbus Reedy High School. I reffed his matches, and weird that you could remember just a few kids from way back in the 70s, but I remember Steve as an excellent wrestler. Went on to Marietta College, played football, and wrestled for them. Earned All-America honors down there. For you Cleveland Browns fans, he damn near became a Cleveland Brown. He was 2 spots away from becoming a Cleveland Brown when they asked him to play in Canada for a year, but he was so eager to get into the banking business, he said, heck with pro football, I'm going to go be a banker. So that's what he did. And he's had quite a career in banking. And Coach asked me, you know, keep it short. You could tell a story. I had some good stories, but then he told me it was going to be a mixed crowd, so there goes the stories. Anyway, we did have one from Westerville North. When Steve was you non-officials, we rotate during the finals especially. Steve was doing the championship match. I was just coming off of 3rd and 4th place. We were done and looked over and watched Steve, and the kids started moving very fast towards the out of bounds, towards the bleachers. And Steve was going to throw his body in there and save the kids from hitting the bleachers. So he started off, and he lost a step or 2 since his Marietta football days, and didn't quite make it there in time. The kids went down on the mat. They were safe as Steve was diving through the air. And if you've ever seen 2,000 people all at once go, ooh, that's what the gym looked like, because the kid was laying there and Steve landed right on him. Now this poor kid's laying there, his life flashes in front of him. You see Steve go, well, he's only 17, so he probably did it twice. He probably had a replay. But Steve landed on this kid. He would have been fine until this big guy comes along and smashes him. Everybody held their breath. Steve gets up. We thought it was going to be like a Roadrunner cartoon, you know, a little flat thing. You get up and bump up the kid. But the kid got up and everybody was, so there's a reason that Superman was white and not black. Anyway, after that, we went down to, Martini's downtown, and started drinking martinis like we normally drink beer. We'd been in a gym all day, we're hot, threw down 5 martinis in half an hour, and the rest of the story is the part I can't tell. It's a big company, isn't it? Yeah. That was the only thing that saved us that night. Was it was snowing like crazy. There was about 10 inches of snow on the ground. You couldn't go more than 10 miles an hour, so we were safe. But about 2.5, 3 years ago, Steve decided he wanted to give up the beautiful weather of Central Ohio and try Southern California, largely because Zan, his wife, was out there. So Steve moved to Southern California, got a beautiful place out there, got married to Zan a little over a year ago. It's convenient for me. My daughter lives in LA, and Steve's like a surrogate father for her. She goes down there quite a bit and sees them. So he's out there, like Kutch said, teaching those guys how we officiate back here. In fact, last year Steve had me, he was working the state championships in California, had me text pictures of our championship so he could show those guys what a real state championship looks like. So we're glad he is and showing it, and I'm proud to introduce my buddy, Steve James.
First of all, I want to thank Greg. Don't know how I'm going to follow him. He's a great historian, but he has problems with remembering. Actually, what happened is I caught the back of the kid's head, and it was like this. It was a perfect classic shot. Columbus Dispatch, 1999, page 2. Anyway, like Greg said, I moved out to California roughly 3 years ago. Left wrestling here in Ohio to do two things. One, followed my wife out there. Well, I had to go, and then a job. So with that, went out there. Plus the weather's gorgeous. You know, I go back out. I go outside. I have my pool. I got the spa. You know, it's just every day is a vacation. And then when I come back here, I came back here last month to visit my dad. And you know, normally when I come back, a couple years ago, I came back and I always come back in shorts and flip-flops, no matter what the temperature is. And my mom used to yell at me because I come from the airport, I jump in the car, it's like 10 degrees, and I said I'm in shorts and flip-flops because this is how I'm going back to California. So I always dress like I'm going back. This time I had to wear a jacket. So, but it's nice out there. It's 48 degrees. But Greg came out to our wedding, and he was my best man, and he told some stories, and he didn't shy away from anything. He told stories about, and every story gets embellished when Greg tells it. So if he ever tells a story about you, just divide it in half, and you can tell the truth. But I'm gonna tell a story about Greg. We were doing the All North tournament, and this coach from your friend Adam Huddle, he was Greg dinged him on sportsmanlike conduct, and he was furious. He got a short temper. And I'm off the mat, and Greg's walking over to the next rotation, and Adam's right behind him just going, "You son of a," just calling him everything in the book. And I walked over to Adam, I said, Adam, I go, "He just hit you with unsportsmanlike conduct. The next one, you're ejected. And if he could hear you, he would throw you out." See, Greg, he is a little bit challenged in terms of hearing, but Adam was sitting there and just giving him all kinds of grief, but Adam did settle down. But I want to thank everybody. I do miss Ohio wrestling, and like Greg said, every time I officiate out there, when I go to state tournament, all the commissioners ask me, he goes, "Well, how does this compare? How does this compare, in terms of, what this association does, what Jim Freeland does, what, just the different associations." I will tell you, hopefully no one has me on video, so going to ship it back out there.
I do.
Because I want to do more state tournaments out there. It doesn't compare. This is the best show on earth when it comes to high school wrestling. And, the last state tournament, I thought it was more like a district to me. The one thing they do have, which is the grind, is they have one state champion. So they take every division and they put them in one tournament. So that starts at, they call the district, what they call the Masters out there, but it's a great time. Competition, there's a couple of tough schools, but if you win the state champion, if you're a state champion in California, you're number one versus the different divisions here. But I do appreciate the fact that I'm here. This is my 30th year, and I will continue to officiate out there in California until they kick me out. I also do football out there. I'm a crew chief. Somehow they just saw me and they sucked me in and put me in these places, and I'm having fun in the sports I love, my job, and everything else out there in the weather. I go from the beach. Oh, you want me to cut it short? Tom Rudy told me to cut it short.
I was saying, don't forget your wife.
No, she's the last thing I have to thank, because without her, I finally found a partner that enjoys this sport and everything we like to do. And she is my partner, my soulmate, and I love her dearly. And we're flying back on Sunday, and she said she would not miss this for the world. When it came up to giving up the state tournament to come here, that was no decision. I was going to be here, and I look and see all these familiar faces, and she goes, "We can move back." And I thought, real seriously, I go, nah. So with that, I want to thank everybody, and all the other inductees. It's been a great time, and thank you guys.
Been a well-kept secret. I don't know if anybody in this room even knows it, but 35 years ago, Well, my husband actually started with the announcing 38 years ago, and after the first year, they asked him to bring in an assistant. So he took one of the assistant coaches into sales, and he came in and he helped them. So the third year then that he was there, he needed an assistant again, and went back to the gentleman, and he didn't want to do it. That was too long of a day, so he asked somebody else and had them that year. So then we're come to now the third year for an assistant. He went back to the first gentleman who said no, went to the second person and he said no, and he's telling me, and we're sitting at the table, I have a year-old baby, and I said, well, gee, Scott, you know, I could do that. There's nothing to it, I could do it. And he said, he didn't say anything. 2 weeks later, he came home and he said, oh, you're going to be working the state tournament with me. You're the assistant announcer. And I said, really? And he says, well, you said you could do it. I said, I could do it. I mean, it's no big deal. You know, all these wrestling tournaments I've been to. So he says, all you're going to have to do is keep the books, watch and see who wins, and keep track of it for me. I said, great. So we get there, and you know, I had been to the state tournament as a spectator for several years, and so I knew how many mats were going, but you sit up there and you learn very quickly that you don't make mistakes. And you have to really, I mean, it's a stressful job. Well, about half hour into the tournament, and at that time, remember, and most of you do, though some of the younger ones will not, you had to announce every match. You announced them in the hole, you announced them on deck, you announced them where they were going to be wrestling, so there was a lot of announcing. Half hour into the tournament, he looks at me and says, my throat's getting sore. I said, you're fine, you're fine. Hour into the tournament, I don't know how much longer I can do this. And I said, really? I said, come on, just, you know, buck up there. You know, 2 hours into the tournament, he looked at me and he said, you're going to have to do this. Unbeknownst to the whole St. John Arena and all you folks out there, I had never announced a wrestling tournament in my life. All I had done was watched. So I now have got to sit in the seat, and I said this, Dr. Bruce Bauer didn't even know about this. I waited 10 years before we ever told him that I had no experience ever of announcing a state tournament. But long story short, it worked out well, and I'm still here today, 35 years later. A lot of memories. Many of you can remember going down to Cincinnati, and I'm standing up there and saying, please stand for the national anthem, and God Save the Queen comes on. And all of the officials that were on the floor just kind of went. Had a lot of explaining to do on that one. Reminds me of that a lot. You remember that?
I forgot about that.
Oh, yes. I never did.
Yeah.
That's right. So on behalf, I want to thank the Board of Governors for this award. I'm very appreciative. I looked and I think I might be the second woman inducted, and that's really special to me. And for all of you table workers, officials, you do a tremendous job. As a mom and watching you out there, what you give to these wrestlers and these kids is an experience they will never forget. And I'd like to thank you all for that.
We're done separately, and this is the first time we've done it together. So I'm really glad this worked out. Scott has been doing the announcing, like they said, for all these years, and helped Dr. Maurer with the organization, and we go through and do the orders of events and all that kind of stuff, and has always worked with us real well. But he's the one that came up with this idea about the narrative before the finals, and that for those of you that haven't been to the state tournament before, you're in for a real treat tonight. And I'm going to put you on the spot, but that is absolutely just unbelievable, and the chills just run up and down your spine when that's going on. So you'll see that a little bit later on. But Scott, why don't you go ahead, Scott Farian.
It's always hard to follow that act, but when I was first asked to do the state tournament, I thought, great, I can get away from the wife. For a while, it lasted 3 years. If anybody's interested, my story really does begin some 38 years ago when Casey Fredericks was still coach at Ohio State here. You might remember one of his favorite wrestlers and a family friend was the Anglin family, Phil Anglin, who was a 38-pounder who constantly beat poor Tom Cua every time they met, who was at DeSales where I was. And he heard me do some announcing at one of our tournaments, and he said, how would you like to be an announcer at the state wrestling tournament? And I said, maybe, I guess so. And it was, of course, it grew on me as being pretty exciting, so I did decide to do that. And at the time, Dr. Jones was the announcer. I don't know if you go back that far to remember when Dr. Meyer was running the tournament, and it was at St. John, of course. And that was then the days when it really had come back to Columbus, and in those days it was split. We had AAA and AAA, and Otterbein Reich Center was where they held the first part of that lower level division, and then they brought them in the second day. But as Priscilla alluded to, it was interesting that in those days, when I think about it now, I don't think I could do it again, but we used to announce every match, and it was just a din. There was just noise all of the time, but every match in the hole, on deck, wrestling, and then I announced the results. So it was great to move to a venue where you could have an electronic board to tell people who was going to wrestle and what was going to happen next. You didn't have to worry too much about that. But it really is incredible to watch the machinery of what happens in this tournament, and I think we have just lost track of the time. We just know that each year, wherever it is on the calendar, we know that we mark that off. And if you work for Bruce Maurer, you know that he doesn't tell you to come back next year. He just tells you when not to come back. So it's always there, and we've just continued to do it and have enjoyed it a great deal. I've watched so many people go through this as wrestlers to coaches and officials and to retirement. Unfortunately, we've been at it that long, but it has been a lot of fun. I get to say to anybody who asks, I have been the only person to announce every 4-time state champion in the state tournament. So that's something that people say, you got to be kidding. Aaron Shrine was asking me the other day, he says, how long have you been doing this? And I told him, well, I started doing it in 1977. I think it's when Aaron was born. But at any rate, he was surprised. He was shocked that it was that long. And but it's a labor of love. It's something that we enjoy doing, and it's, honest to goodness, it is really fun that Priscilla and I can do this together. And it's fun that we're talking to each other right now, because Saturday morning is when you get like this, because we try to announce every 3rd, 5th, and 7th place match. She has to be able to control the board, to find that for me, to tell me. I cross-check it on my sheet, I cross-check it in the program, and there have just been some times where there are fingernails in my arm, and it's the wrong one, that's the wrong thing. We try to cover all of our own mistakes, and hopefully not too many people notice them. I'm sure somebody does, especially the kids' parents who I butcher. But it's been also a challenge to try and do a good job, just as you do, in everything that is a part of this tournament. And, I'm grateful to the Board of Governors to recognize someone outside of the ranks of the officials, someone who has been a part of it, but probably not the people that you would think of right away. And it's very gratifying to know that there is a family here at the state tournament. When we do come each year, it's like a reunion, I think. You see the people that you haven't for a year, and you're glad to see them again, and some that I've seen over and over and over again, being in the Central District. So I am grateful and appreciative and humbled that you would think to include us, and hopefully we'll have deserved this honor to be alongside the names of some of the individuals that have been introduced today and in the past. So thank you very much.
I want to thank all of our inductees for your service. There's probably 150, 200 years worth of collectively of years service to Ohio wrestling. Out on the bar out there are the plaques that will be presented to them. We showed the one, and if you guys want, as you leave, if you want to take a look at those, they're really pretty nice. Joe Reichert and I redesigned them because we just wanted to update and make it more prominent. We do have one award to give today that we've never had to give before. We had nearly a fatality this weekend, but in getting the plaques, somebody got cut up, so we got him a Purple Heart. Dave, here's your Purple Heart. I want to thank you guys for coming, and thanks for your attention, and thanks for all that you do for Ohio wrestling. We're going to have a short Board of Governors meeting right here in this room, and thank you, and we'll see you down the floor in a little bit. You'll be receiving this from me down in the arena tonight, but we thought you'd like to take a look at it.
How can I carry that and that crutch at the same time?
We'll have somebody carry it for you.
All right.
So, thanks, Tom. Next up is will be for Paul and John. You're going to talk.
Yes.
So John Butch is a longtime official out of Youngstown and college official, EWL secretary, and secretary of Steel Valley since day one, day two, because Paul was the first day one. So,
right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with a lot of my peers, and it's a real pleasure for me having the opportunity to introduce Paul. So I'm just going to read my notes, and you'll get an idea of what the breadth of Paul's experience was. Paul first began wrestling at Farrell High School in Western Pennsylvania. If any of you don't know Farrell High School, they still to this day hold the 11 state titles in wrestling, and they stopped wrestling 1949. So he was on a team that was just loaded with talent, and then they dropped the program, which is a shame. That's where Paul first got his start. He also started the wrestling program at Hubbard High School. That was back in 1965. Paul also served as an assistant coach for that team for 12 years. Then Paul decided that he wanted to be a wrestling official. That was in 1967. He received his license, Class 1 license, in 1969. He also became an official over in Pennsylvania for the PIAA. Served in dual chapters. Likewise, I did the same thing. His wrestling officiating career then spanned the next 19 years. So for 19 years, he was an official. Paul had the distinction, after having to travel from Hubbard to Stowe for meetings, decided that he was going to organize and became the founding father of our current chapter today, the Steel Valley Wrestling Officials, which was based in Hubbard, and now we now meet out of Boston Town Fitch and Liberty High School. He served as the president of that organization for 10 years, was our rules interpreter for 5 years. He also served on the Northeast District Advisory Board for 5 years, and was also a member of the Officials Evaluating Committee, if you remember back when we had that committee. Outside of Ohio, Paul was a member of the Shenango Valley chapter over Western Pennsylvania, was a president of that chapter for 2 years, was a member of the Eastern Wrestling League, which is a college association, was a member of that for 10 years, and was also USA Wrestling for 10 years. Paul ranked as a top 20 official in Ohio for 20 years, and was top 10 for 12 of those years. Some of his credits, wrestling credits: the Holland Invitational, 15 years, did the Hopple Tournament, 14 years. He officiated 17 sectional tournaments, 15 districts, and was alternate for 2 state tournaments and officiated at 2 state tournaments. Just a few things in his spare time. You think a guy that busy couldn't do things in his spare time. Paul also coached midget football for 13 years and had 7 undefeated seasons while he coached that football team, and Little League Baseball for 4 years. Paul's retired from General Motors Corporation, now lives in Loudon, Tennessee, as a father of 3 children, he and his wife, Rosemary, have 5 grandchildren, and they have 4 great-grandchildren. And some of those folks will be here tonight for the ceremony. So I said, it's one thing about Paul, he was an outstanding mentor. We've got a couple other guys in this room that remember some of the things that he taught us, and we've used those over our career. Although there was one thing, if you ever watched Paul officiate, that he had a bad habit, but he always wore a towel in his back pocket. And he tiptoed around the mat, he's like a little ballerina. He was a little ballerina on the mat with that towel hanging out of his back pocket, just bouncing around on the mat. Today, if you were evaluating officials, probably docked them about 10 points for that stupid towel in his back pocket. But in those days, he was tops. And I said it was a pleasure for me being mentored by Paul, and I'm sure the other officials would say the same thing. So, thanks, Paul.
Okay. Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, I'd like to talk to you a couple of hours here about wrestling. Because that's the only thing I know. But anyway, John, I thank you, and I thank the committee for electing me to go onto the Hall of Fame. And over the years, I went to a school in Pennsylvania, and in my senior year, they canceled wrestling. They call it BB, basketball, took over. And we had 11 individual state champions and 11 state championships too at the same time. But my biggest thing with this wrestling is the kids. I love coaching the kids from the 6 to 12-year-olds that we had, and I had the fortune of forming the wrestling club over in Ohio. We started out with 12 kids, and when I left, we had 85, something like that, about 85. And they're still going strong today. I'm proud of the fact that I produced a 4-time state champion. And that stands out in my mind quite a bit. Over the years, the kids, the young kids, were the ones that I enjoyed working with the most. There's not a feeling in the world that when you have a kid that struggled all year long, never won a match, and then when he finally won that match, he didn't run to his father's arms, he ran into my arms. And I'll never forget that for as long as I live. And in the audience here today, we have a 5 times Rich, a tournament. He's been here 5 times this year. Anyway, I want to thank the committee, and I enjoyed all the camaraderie I had over the years with all the officials and all the good time banquets. Okay, and I thank you all very much.